Now we know there's tremendous election fraud. Tremendous. But we also know there's even just as great medical fraud.
Something broke in Oklahoma in the summer of 2026, and the speed at which it happened caught everyone completely off guard. Pastor Jackson Lahmeyer, who had spent years standing at pulpits and political rallies preaching about God, family, and moral courage, was exposed not by political enemies or investigative journalists, but by the text messages he sent with his own two hands. And the woman who brought those messages to light has already told the world in calm and measured language that she has not yet said everything. The text that ended everything. If you have been following American political or faith-based news over the past few years, you probably already had a complicated feeling about Jackson Lahmeyer before any of this started. He was never the kind of figure you could be indifferent about. He was loud, deliberate, and built his entire platform on the idea that he was willing to say the things that everyone else was too afraid to say. So when the story finally broke on June 14th of 2026, it did not arrive quietly. It arrived the way everything involving Lahmeyer arrives, which is at full volume and with no room to look away. The Daily Mail published a story that day featuring intimate text messages exchanged between Lahmeyer and a woman named Caitlin Simmons Key. She was his campaign fundraiser, a Republican donor, and a former Miss Oklahoma USA from 2007. The texts were not vague, and they were not taken out of context. In one message, he told her he had enjoyed her lips. In another, he invited her to his hotel room. In another, he described leaving a Mar-a-Lago event in the very early hours of the morning to visit a strip club, where he told her he had been offered and claimed he declined it. What happened immediately after those texts became public tells you everything about the world Lahmeyer had been operating in. His first move was not to confess, it was to deny. He went online and called the story a British tabloid hit job. He used the word distorted. He positioned himself as a victim of coordinated political warfare being launched against him right before a primary election. 2 full days after that story broke, Jackson Lahmeyer still advanced to the Republican runoff for Oklahoma's 1st congressional district, collecting 25.9% of the vote in a multi-candidate primary. His base did not abandon him overnight. Some of them saw the coverage as further confirmation that he was being targeted by people who wanted him silenced. Then came June 17th, and the whole structure collapsed at once. Donald Trump, who had called Lahmeyer a mega warrior in a lengthy public endorsement just 4 days earlier, withdrew that endorsement without ceremony and threw his support behind State Representative Mark Tedford. Within hours of Trump's exit, Lahmeyer suspended his campaign entirely. It was only after suspending that he finally stopped calling it a lie. He told the Daily Mail that he had had a affair with Caitlin Simmons Key in 2022. He admitted to kissing her. He admitted to cheating on his wife, Kendra. And then, in what might be the most revealing statement of this entire collapse, he said he had chosen his wife over a dream, and that what happened to his campaign might have actually spared his life and his family. Kendra Lahmeyer had already found the messages before Mother's Day. She had sent her own message to Key, calling her a home-wrecking woman and asking whether she had enjoyed destroying their family. Key herself was measured in how she responded. She said she had never set out to destroy the man, that his own actions had accomplished that entirely on their own. But she also said something that deserves far more attention than it has received, that she had withheld further detail out of restraint, and that there is more to the story. That statement is still sitting out there, unresolved, and it is the kind of statement that does not tend to mean nothing. To understand why this fall landed with the particular weight that it did, you need to understand what Lahmeyer had actually built over the years, because the man who went down in 48 hours had spent nearly a decade constructing something that most pastors in America could never dream of coming close to. The former nightclub and the man who took the stage. Jackson Lahmeyer did not build his platform out of nothing. He studied at Oral Roberts University in Tulsa, earning both a bachelor's and master's degree in theological studies. Before leading his own church, He worked as a crusade director for Christ for the Nations and served as Oklahoma State Coordinator for the Billy Graham Evangelistic Association under Franklin Graham. Those credentials gave him credibility in evangelical circles and helped establish trust with audiences who respected that lineage. In 2017, he and his wife Kendra took over Sheridan Church in Tulsa, a congregation founded in 1951 as Sheridan Christian Center. The church building had an unusual history. It was once a nightclub called The Caravan. Rather than distancing himself from that past, Lahmeyer embraced it, using the transformation from nightclub to church as a symbol of redemption and purpose. When the Washington Post profiled him in September 2021, the church had roughly 300 in-person attendees. Lahmeyer openly acknowledged that his online audience was much larger than his physical congregation. By March 2025, Oklahoma Watch reported that membership had grown to 1,700 people across 2 campuses, including a second location in Oklahoma City. He had also launched Sheridan Bible College from the same Tulsa building. What separated Lahmeyer from many pastors was his understanding that influence was no longer tied to the size of a church building. He recognized that public visibility came from engaging in controversial issues. In 2021, he appeared before Tulsa's City Council and declared opposition to pandemic mandates, saying, "We didn't comply last year, and we will not comply this year." The clip spread far beyond Tulsa and brought him national attention. That attention fueled ambitions that extended well beyond a local congregation. But the event that truly transformed him from a regional pastor into a nationally recognized figure had little to do with preaching and everything to do with a form that anyone in America could access for just $1. The $1 operation that made him famous. In September 2021, as COVID-19 vaccine mandates spread across the United States, employees everywhere faced a difficult choice between keeping their jobs and following their personal convictions. During that debate, Jackson Lahmeyer took a step that quickly drew national attention. He posted a COVID-19 religious accommodation form on the Sheridan Church website and announced he would sign it for anyone who became an online church member. The process required watching a church service and donating at least $1. The response was immediate. According to interviews he gave at the time, nearly 30,000 people downloaded the form within 2 days. Days later, that number reportedly exceeded 35,000. Most of those individuals had never attended Sheridan Church in person. Many had never even heard one of Lahmeyer's sermons before. They were workers from hospitals, schools, government offices, and private companies who feared losing their jobs and saw the form as a possible solution. Lahmeyer defended the effort by arguing that it was not his role to question someone's religious beliefs. If a person believed God had instructed them not to take the vaccine, he said that was between them and God. Critics strongly disagreed. Legal experts and religious freedom scholars argued that obtaining a form through a $1 online membership would make it difficult to demonstrate a deeply held religious conviction. Some advocacy groups went even further, accusing him of effectively selling religious exemptions. Yet, despite the controversy, no government agency took action against him. There was no major investigation and no legal case. Instead, the attention dramatically expanded his public profile. What critics intended as condemnation often became validation in the eyes of his supporters. Every accusation was framed as proof that powerful institutions opposed him. That dynamic helped transform Lahmeyer from a local pastor into a national figure and laid the foundation for an even bigger movement that was still to come. You cannot fully understand how Jackson Lahmeyer went from a Tulsa pastor with 300 congregants to a Trump-endorsed congressional frontrunner without spending time on the people who helped engineer that transformation. And the single most important name in that story is Roger Stone, the machine that should not have worked. When Jackson Lahmeyer launched his 2022 Senate campaign against Senator James Lankford, he positioned himself as a challenger, backed by some of the most influential figures in Trump's political orbit. Although he ultimately lost by more than 40 percentage points, the campaign helped expand his national profile. Records showed that more than $181,000 was paid to Roger Stone's consulting firm, Drake Ventures, making Stone a significant influence on the campaign's messaging and strategy. Another key supporter was Michael Flynn, Trump's former national security advisor. Lahmeyer later recalled that Flynn personally called him after hearing him discuss the 2020 election on a podcast and encouraged him to run. According to Lahmeyer, he accepted the suggestion immediately, describing the conversation in terms that reflected his deep respect for Flynn's leadership. After the Senate defeat, Lahmeyer quickly shifted focus. In December 2022, he announced the creation of Pastors for Trump, claiming the organization involved more than 10,000 pastors and included several prominent religious figures. The announcement generated national attention and strengthened his reputation among conservative Christian activists. However, later reporting raised questions about the group's structure, noting that it had never been formally incorporated and lacked official IRS registration. Lahmeyer responded that the organization had never raised money and therefore did not require a formal financial framework. Despite the scrutiny, Lahmeyer's influence continued to grow. Sheridan Church became a gathering place for well-known conservative figures. Guests and speakers associated with Trump's movement regularly appeared at church events, helping transform the church into a prominent hub for political and cultural activism. Critics, including advocacy organizations, repeatedly accused the church of crossing the line between religious ministry and political campaigning. Multiple complaints were filed with the IRS, but no enforcement action followed. Lahmeyer often joked publicly about the complaints, treating them as evidence that his message was attracting attention. By this point, his political connections and growing platform seemed stronger than ever. Yet the controversy surrounding him was about to shift from politics to something far more difficult to defend. The things he said, loud and on the record. There is a version of Jackson Lahmeyer's story that portrays him as a pastor who became too involved in politics and eventually faced the consequences. But that interpretation overlooks the substance of what made him controversial in the first place. These were not private remarks or isolated mistakes. They were public statements delivered from church stages, interviews, podcasts, and political events, often with complete confidence and little hesitation. Over the years, Lahmeyer made a series of remarks that drew significant criticism. He described the founders of Black Lives Matter in highly inflammatory terms, called the LGBTQ movement demonic. Defended conspiracy broadcaster Alex Jones argued that the January 6th defendants were political prisoners and claimed the real insurrection occurred during the 2020 election rather than at the U.S. Capitol. He also suggested that Martin Luther King Jr. would support the MAGA movement if he were alive today. In October 2024, Lahmeyer reignited controversy when he publicly stated that the Antichrist would be a political leader of Jewish descent. Similar comments had appeared in his speeches before, often alongside declarations of support for Israel and the Jewish people. Critics argued that the combination created confusion and concern, while scholars noted that although Antichrist prophecies exist within evangelical theology, Lahmeyer's presentation of them went far beyond ordinary doctrinal discussion. What stands out is that none of these controversies significantly damaged his influence. Public criticism came from advocacy groups, religious scholars, political opponents, and even some fellow Republicans. Yet, his platform continued to grow. His supporters often viewed the backlash not as evidence of wrongdoing, but as proof that he was challenging powerful institutions. In that environment, controversy became an asset rather than a liability. The statements that critics found most alarming were often the same statements that energized his audience. Far from weakening his position, the outrage frequently strengthened it. But while his influence appeared secure, forces were already moving behind the scenes that would eventually change the trajectory of his rise in ways he never expected. On February 7, 2025, Jackson Lahmeyer stood inside the Oval Office as President Donald Trump signed the executive order establishing the White House Faith Office. He was not there as a guest or spectator. He was present as a member of the National Faith Advisory Board, placing him firmly within Trump's recognized circle of faith leaders. For a pastor whose church had once drawn only a few hundred attendees in a converted Tulsa nightclub, it marked a remarkable rise in influence and visibility. By March 2026, Lahmeyer had set his sights on an even bigger goal: Oklahoma's open 1st Congressional District seat. With Senator Markwayne Mullin moving on, the race quickly became one of the state's most closely watched contests. Lahmeyer entered with powerful backing. Trump endorsed him enthusiastically. Speaker Mike Johnson and Majority Leader Steve Scalise followed. Even Oklahoma GOP Chair Charity Lynch publicly supported him so early and forcefully that several former state party leaders criticized the move and called for her resignation. Their objections changed nothing. By nearly every measure, Lahmeyer appeared to be the frontrunner. He had strong fundraising, deep political connections, and substantial name recognition among conservative voters. Then, just 4 days before the June primary, Trump released another endorsement, praising him as a mega warrior and expressing complete confidence in his campaign. In a deeply conservative Republican primary, few endorsements carry more weight. Most observers viewed the race as effectively decided. Lahmeyer's years of building alliances, cultivating influence, and expanding his platform seemed ready to culminate in a seat in the United States Congress. But politics has a way of changing overnight. Just as victory appeared within reach, a years-old secret held by one woman was about to emerge. Within 48 hours, the momentum that had carried Lahmeyer to the brink of Congress would face its greatest test. What Caitlin Simmons Key has not said yet. When Caitlin Simmons Key spoke to reporters after the story broke, she was careful with her language in a way that anyone paying close attention would find both significant and unsettling. She said her intention had never been to destroy Lahmeyer. She said she simply believed the people inside his congregation deserved to know what kind of man was standing at the front of their church every week. She said his own actions had accomplished the destruction entirely on their own. And then she added the line that has not received nearly enough attention, which is that she had withheld further detail out of restraint, and that there was more to the story. After Lahmeyer advanced to the runoff on June 16th, Trump withdrew his endorsement on June 17th. Lahmeyer suspended his campaign within hours of that withdrawal. He went to Sheridan Church, held a closed-door meeting with congregants that ran approximately 30 minutes, and had security personnel at the entrance with instructions to screen attendees based on how long they had been members of the congregation. The press was barred from entering. He then announced an indefinite sabbatical from preaching, with no stated timeline for return. The planned Eric Trump event at the church was scrapped, with the former president's son quietly removed from all promotional materials. Lahmeyer deleted his accounts on both X and Facebook. He told the Daily Mail he had confessed everything to his congregation and had personally apologized to donors and to Trump. His wife's text message to Key had already become one of the most quoted moments of this entire collapse, and it lands differently when you sit with it carefully. Kendra Lahmeyer had found the messages before Mother's Day, weeks before the primary. She had chosen to stay, or at least chosen not to leave publicly, and her husband was asking Oklahoma voters to keep supporting him during a period when his household was privately managing a crisis that had already been going on for weeks, while he was calling the story a British tabloid hit job to anyone who would listen. The lesson of Jackson Lahmeyer is not simply that a moral failure ended a political career. Moral failures have ended political careers before, and the people involved eventually recovered or moved on. The lesson of Jackson Lahmeyer is something far more specific and far more uncomfortable than that. For years, every single thing that should have stopped him did not. The vaccine exemption operation that critics called fraud, the unincorporated nonprofit that solicited an audience for a board that was never assembled, the IRS complaints that never produced consequences, the extremist rhetoric delivered on the record at national events, the conspiratorial theology preached from a pulpit inside a former nightclub in Tulsa. The only thing that finally brought it down was a private failure in the exact area he had preached the loudest and the longest about in his public ministry. He did not fall because of his politics. He did not fall because of his rhetoric. He fell because of his marriage, the very institution he had made central to his brand. That tells you more about the machine Lahmeyer spent a decade building himself into than anything else in this entire story. And Caitlin Simmons Key has already said there is more. Drop your thoughts in the comments below and let us know whether you think Jackson Lahmeyer's story is over or whether the part we have not yet heard is still coming.